involved with the investigation and spying on the Trump campaign. Look around. John Durham is coming. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Boy, do I have a lot of Bill Barr tape to play for you today. He gave 2 interviews yesterday, one to the Dean of DOJ Correspondence, the amazing Pete Williams, one to Gerard Baker, the former editor-in-chief, now editor-at-large of the Wall Street Journal. Incredible stuff. Never heard this sort of stuff from an attorney general before. I worked for 2 of them. I've met Barr only once, but he is a straight shooter. John Durham is a prosecutor's prosecutor, and for whom does the bell toll? The bell tolls for thee, Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe and everyone else involved in this. The bell is tolling. Before I go there, let me just say thank you to everyone. We now have 953 donors to the Salvation Army Red Kettle who have donated $160,587. I would love to get to 1,000 donors this morning. I'd love to make $250,000 by the end of this month. Some of you are just now starting to make your year-end donations for tax purposes. Please consider online at the Salvation Army. Please, we need every dollar because, you know, they got booted out by Chick-fil-A. The gifts you give will help people this Christmas. But as a Salvation Army volunteer tells us, the need is 52 weeks a year.
And it's amazing how people want to help, but I challenge them to look at the other 365 days of the year because the need's there every day of the week. When you think about giving back, the good Lord has given us so much, and we look around and everybody, it's not dependent on anybody's race, color, origin, religion. They all come together, and it's great to be able to do that.
So please take a moment at the beginning of the show, beginning of the podcast, if you're listening on tape delay right now, before you forget, to help those who are less fortunate. Just click on that red kettle banner at HughHewitt.com and get us up over $175,000 today. Get us to 1,000. Now, Bill Barr. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to start with Gerard Baker. Because if you watch, a lot of you don't watch NBC or MSNBC, despite my yeoman efforts to get you there. But Gerard Baker is an extraordinary journalist, and Bill Barr sat down with him and said this, cut number 15.
Yeah, this is the meat of the issue, and if you actually spend time to look at what happened, I think you'd be appalled. Remember, they say, okay, we're not going to go and talk to the campaign. We're going to send people in, wire them up, and have them talk to the individuals. That happened. That happened in August, September, and October, and it all came back exculpatory. People say, I don't know, don't know what you're talking about. Not only exculpatory as to a relationship with the Russians, but as to the specific facts. And that, A, they never did anything about that. They just pressed ahead. But B, they never informed the court. They were told they didn't have probable cause to get a warrant, and so they took the STEELE dossier, which they had done nothing to verify, and they used that to get the warrant to just collapse everything. They withheld from the court all the exculpatory information, and they withheld from the court information about the lack of reliability of STEELE. The real interesting thing here, and to me the major takeaway, actually is after the election. Because in January, they went to, STEELE was dealing with one person. They only talked to one person. And that's what we call the primary subsource. And it was that person who had the so-called network of subsources. When they finally got around to talking to him, he said, I don't know what STEELE's talking about. I didn't tell him this stuff. Or, it was mostly barroom talk and rumor. I made it clear to him this was my own suppositions and theories. And, this is, and at that point, it was clear that the dossier was a sham. So what happens? What happens at that point? They don't tell the court, and they continue to get FISA warrants based on that dossier. And more damning is that they actually filed with the court a statement saying, we talked to the subsource, and we found him credible and cooperative.
Unbelievable. But then he goes to NBC, talks to Pete Williams, cut number 9.
Well, I'm glad to get into the issue of predication, but let me just start out by saying that I think you have to put this in context. I think the heart of the IG's report really focused on how the investigation was conducted once it got going, and that is especially the very serious abuses of FISA that occurred, much of which has been, in my view, not accurately reported by the press over the last day. But in one area, I do disagree with the IG, and that was whether there was sufficient predication to open a full-blown counterintelligence investigation, specifically using the techniques that they did to collect intelligence about the Trump campaign.
Well, as a policy matter, why not open an investigation on a thin pretext? I guess on the one hand, you could say it's a presidential campaign. It's very sensitive. You need better evidence. On the other hand, you could say it's a presidential campaign. We have to be very careful. There could be a threat to our political process.
Well, I think probably from a civil liberties standpoint, the greatest danger to our free system is that the incumbent government use the apparatus of the state, principally the law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies, both to spy on political opponents, but also to use them in a way that could affect the outcome of the election. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time in history that this has been done to a presidential campaign, the use of these counterintelligence techniques against a presidential campaign. And we have to remember that in today's world, presidential campaigns are frequently in contact with foreign persons. And indeed, in most campaigns, there are signs of illegal foreign money coming in. And we don't automatically assume that the campaigns are nefarious and traitors and acting in league with foreign powers. There has to be some basis before we use these very potent powers in our core First Amendment activity. And here, I felt this was very flimsy. Basically, I think the department has a rule of reason, which is at the end of the day, is what you're relying on sufficiently powerful to justify the techniques you're using? And the question there is, how strong is the evidence? How sensitive is the activity you're looking at? And what are the alternatives? And I think when you step back here and say, what was this all based on? It's not sufficient. Remember, there was and never has been any evidence of collusion, and yet this campaign and the president's administration has been dominated by this investigation into what turns out to be completely baseless.
Absolutely correct. So Pete Williams asks Bill Barr, do you want to withdraw that use of the term spying? And Barr responds, cut number 10.
Well, I think there are a number of scenarios, but I don't want to get into them. I think there could have been a lot of motivations involved, and different motivations. And there could have been motivations in the FBI and motivations outside the FBI by other players in this. This thing focuses on the FBI. There was a lot going on around this that is not the subject matter of Horowitz's report, but I think has a direct bearing, perhaps, on what was going on in the FBI.
Based on what you know so far, do you still stand by your statement that the campaign was spied upon?
Oh, it's clearly spied upon. I mean, that's what electronic surveillance is. I think wiring people up to go in and talk to people and make recordings of their conversations is spying. I think going through people's emails, which they did as a result of the FISA warrant, they went through everything, from Page's life.
Because he wasn't in the campaign at the point where he began the surveillance.
Yes, but his emails go back. I mean, the main reason they were going for the FISA warrant initially was to go back historically and seize all his emails and texts and all that stuff from back months and even years. So they were covering the period that he was in the campaign, and that's exactly the reason they went for the FISA, to get that stuff.
People are going to jail. More of the William Barr interviews yesterday. He's a very serious, competent man. It's his second time around. He's at least as well qualified as anyone in the United States to be the Attorney General. People who criticize Bill Barr do not know what they're talking about, or they are blinded by Trump derangement syndrome. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.